Top of the hour, here's where we stand on the debt ceiling. Republican leaders in the House expected to start a key meeting any minute. Still no vote on Boehner's bill. And even if there is one, by all accounts, it will not pass as is in the Senate. Meanwhile, executives from the top banks in the land are going to get their chance to ask officials from the Treasury Department today what will happen if Congress fails to raise the borrowing limit before Tuesday. I want to bring in Senator Mike Crapo, Republican from Idaho, who joins us this morning from the Hill. Senator, good morning once again. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
We've had Leader Reid giving some comments in the past few minutes saying that we have hours to act. I think McConnell speaking maybe as we're talking right now. If Reid decides to move ahead, would Republicans block him?
If Reid moves his proposal forward, I do believe the Republicans will block it. It is a proposal that is filled with a lot of smoke and mirrors, does not have adequate enforcement in place, does not have a vote on the balanced budget amendment, and extends the spending for $2.5 trillion over about 15 months in return for projected spending cuts that are not expected to become real over 10 years. We've got to have more reform than that.
So do you think the compromise is more likely on the Senate side or the House side? Are we past talking about Boehner's bill or not?
Well, actually, there are a lot of similarities between the Boehner bill and the Reid bill as well. And I believe that the core similarities are what will form the basis for a deal in the end. And again, the bottom line is we've got to have at least $3 trillion, I think, of spending reduction in order to give the kind of debt ceiling extension that the president is demanding, or create the two-step process that Speaker Boehner is talking about that will give us the ability to tie down those spending cuts over a period of time and make sure that they're real.
But that means we're going to have a day kind of like this one sometime around Christmas, right?
Well, probably, but the bottom line is that, you know, the average time that the debt ceiling has been extended over the last 30 or 40 years has been somewhere around 7 months. Asking for a $2.5 trillion extension of the debt ceiling just so we can get past the next election, I think is problematic, because it just represents the spending path going forward without any reforms put in place. And you know, the United States faces much more than just a debt ceiling battle. The bigger issue is the debt crisis that we face. And when we do get past this debt ceiling battle, and we will, then we will still face a debt crisis in the United States, and we still need to have a very aggressive shift of American fiscal policy on both the tax reform front and on the spending front.
Senator, are you concerned, though, that if there is a short-term extension here, that it is simply going to weigh on businesses already? You know, we're in the thick, as you know, of earnings season right now, and virtually on every single conference call, it is the issue of the debt ceiling debate and what is happening in Washington, the uncertainty. They cite that as a reason why customers are not willing to place orders, that perhaps this could actually be a drag on the economy, especially as we got second quarter GDP that came in lighter than expected. First quarter and fourth quarter were revised lower.
Well, I certainly do think that's a relevant factor, but I think you'd have an equal, if not larger, drag if we just extended the debt ceiling for $2.5 trillion over 18 months and said, hey, you know what, we're just going to keep our spending patterns in place. My point is we have to have, and in fact the rating agencies have said this too, if we were to just extend the debt ceiling and not reform the system in some major way, I think we'd see downgrades anyway. We'd see that kind of uncertainty and frankly the impact of the debt crisis, which is the much bigger issue here, would continue to be moving ahead at pace. And so, again, we have to take the kind of action that will show the world markets, in my opinion, that the United States is beginning to get serious about true reform of our fiscal policy.
Senator, it's David Faber. A silver lining here for me is the fact that we're even having the conversation for whatever reason about these significant issues you raise. When it comes to spending, though, so much focus on Medicare and on the ever-rising costs in terms of medical costs in this country. What do you believe ultimately is going to be a fix there that can actually pass both houses of Congress and be signed by the president over the next year or two, let's assume, if we actually saw some legislation?
Well, you're right. That is one of the key areas, and in fact, that's one of the key problems with the Reid bill, because it simply omits any significant entitlement reform in its proposal. But I believe that the the place we can find the support is exactly where the Gang of Six moved into it. And that is to identify a number of parts, like the Class Act of the Obamacare legislation that is on a bipartisan basis recognized as a huge problem in terms of our solvency in the future, and then move forward with agreed targets for controlling the growth of entitlement spending, probably around GDP +1 or even lower, and then enforcing those with a strong enforcement mechanism. That's the approach that the Gang of Six takes. We look at about $500 billion of health entitlement savings over 10 years. It needs to be bigger than that, but moving in that direction, establishing those targets, and then taking out some of the huge solvency problems in the Obamacare legislation is the direction we need to take.
Senator, just a pedestrian question on the mechanics of how laws are made. By when do we, I mean, it feels like, given the time constraints of how this would have to work, regardless of what compromise we came up with, that we will probably wake up on Monday with nothing yet on the president's desk. Is that probably accurate?
Well, if we continue to battle, that is true, but
when does that clock run out today?
It is possible for Congress to move extremely fast if we get agreement. We can move by unanimous consent in the Senate, and we can move by essentially unanimous consent in the House procedurally and have the votes. And so if it's necessary, in a day or two, Congress can pass legislation, but that requires that we have an agreement to move forward. If we don't have that agreement and we face a filibuster in the Senate, it could take weeks.
So I'm guessing you think we need to have that agreement by Saturday?
I would say Sunday night. It's hard to say for sure because we really can move fast if we do get an agreement. But if we don't have it Sunday night or early Monday morning, I think that we should then be looking at the potential of not being able to get it all done before the expiration. I would also say, though, that even then, if it was clear that we did have the agreement, that we were moving forward, that we might lapse over 24 hours or something, then we could probably stabilize the markets with the assurance that we did have the deal and we were moving it.
Right. Well, I hope you like pizza, because you're going to be eating a lot of it. Senator, good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Mike Crapo of Idaho.